at age 52, both legends of our game. Our thoughts are with the Marsh and Warne families, their friends, their former teammates and all those who love cricket throughout this country and around the world. If Rod Marsh defined cricket here in Australia in the 1970s and 1980s as part of those iconic Australian cricket teams that performed so well on the field and many of us grew up with, Shane Warne redefined cricket in the 1990s and 2000s. He was a legend of the game. He elevated leg spin bowling to cult status at a time when pace bowling was dominating our game. Our thoughts are with all of those who knew and loved Shane and Rodney. We will work with the families in the days and weeks ahead to ensure that we acknowledge their outstanding cricket careers and their contributions to cricket here in Australia and around the world. I'm joined here by Minister Pakula, and I'll hand over to him to say a few words on behalf of Victorian Government.
Thanks, Lachlan. I'm just a little bit older than Shane Warne, and when I was a young boy, Rodney Marsh was my absolute cricketing hero, and when I was a young man, Shane Warne was my cricketing hero. And he was the greatest cricketer Victoria's ever produced. He's the best leg spinner of all time, and he's the greatest cricketer I've ever seen. And I was, like I think everyone, just shocked and gobsmacked when I woke up this morning and saw the news. Shane Warne was the sort of cricketer that made you stop doing whatever you were doing. And right through his career, the minute he came on to bowl, you would drop everything, you'd sit down, and you wouldn't leave the couch until his spell was over, because you always knew something incredible could happen, and so often it did. And 52 is just way too young, and it's incredibly sad, not just for cricket fans, but for everyone who loves an Australian legend, which is what Shane Warne was. I've spoken to the Premier this morning and to Steve Bracks, the Chair of the MCG Trust, and Stuart Fox, and I understand the Premier's been in contact with Shane's family, and I just did want to tell you all today that we will be renaming the Great Southern Stand, the SK Warne Stand, and we'll be doing that as soon as we possibly can. I can think of no finer tribute to the greatest cricketer this state's ever produced than to rename the stand the SK Warne Stand. And no matter whatever happens to that stand in the future, whether it's rebuilt, refurbished, renovated, it will remain the SK Warne Stand in perpetuity, because his legend will live in perpetuity. He is the greatest cricketer this state has ever produced, and it will be a long, long time before we see one anywhere near as good as him. So I want to just add my good wishes and my condolences to his parents and his children, Jackson, Brooke and Summer, and as much as possible to reflect the sentiment that I think all Victorians and Australians are feeling, which is one of shock and disbelief that this legend of our great game has gone too soon. Thank you.
Thank you. We've also had direct contact from the Prime Minister this morning as well, and we'll work with both the federal and the state government to ensure that Shane's memory is honoured appropriately, as Minister Pakula has pointed out. Also joined by Cricket Victoria Chief Executive Nick Cummins, so happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, well, the Premier's offered a state funeral, and I believe the Prime Minister has as well. I can't tell you at the moment what the family's preference is, but obviously it will be a matter for them. Whether it's a state funeral, whether they decide instead to conduct a private funeral, and maybe that's followed by a state memorial or something of that nature, I think that'll take a few days to unfold, and understandably We've just got to let them grieve. So the family will make a decision in the coming days, but the offer's been made by both the Premier and the PM.
Martin, that decision been made about the great setting standards quite quickly. Can you just talk us through that process?
Well, I suppose I don't want to talk about the process other than to say I had a conversation with Dan a couple of hours ago, and I know that he's exchanged messages with Shane's brother, and whilst there might be a technical process that would normally be gone through, I think sometimes you need to just you need to dispense with that, and you need to respond in the way that I think the whole community would think is appropriate. There are grandstands in sporting venues around Australia which are named after the greatest, whether it's the greatest cricketers, the greatest footballers in those respective states. We've got a grandstand here named after Bill Ponsford, and as great as Bill Ponsford was, Shane Warne's the greatest cricketer we've ever had. And the stand where Bay 13 was, where his fans saluted him for all those years, where they watched him take that 700th wicket on Boxing Day, that should be named after Shane Warne, and it's going to be. Thanks all.
So thank you all for coming. It's been obviously a busy 24 hours for cricket in this country and around the world. Our men's team currently in Pakistan playing in the first test, an iconic test match, first for 24 years in that country. Our women's team in New Zealand embark on their World Cup campaign today. So our thoughts on this really sad occasion are with all the cricket family across both this country and around the world. And we again pass on our condolences to both the families of Rod Marsh and Shane Warne, cricket greats in this country and obviously around the world. Thank you all.
Oh, sorry, what's your response to the fact that it's going to be renamed the SK Warne stand? Do you think that's a fitting tribute to such a giant of the game?
So as Minister Pakula has announced this morning, that would seem a very appropriate acknowledgement of Shane Warne. He's been an icon of the game. Obviously Victorian St Kilda Cricket Club, Victoria, our Australian team for so many years. He also played cricket all around the world, so it's a very fitting tribute for Shane Warne.
And does the Australian cricket team have any other plans to memorialise his impact in coming days?
So it's been incredibly difficult for our team in Pakistan in the last 24 hours. Yesterday we acknowledged the passing of Rod Marsh with a minute's silence at the start of that game, the test match yesterday. Today on day 2 there will be a minute's silence for the passing of Shane Warne, and that minute's silence will be replicated by our women in their first World Cup match in New Zealand today as well.
Lachlan, how hard has it been as a board, spread here and there and everywhere, what kind of discussions have been held in terms of how to sort of unite Australian cricket after a pretty difficult 24 hours?
Yeah, it's an incredibly tricky 24 hours. I think it's it's a time for us to really acknowledge our past players. Cricket Australia is working very closely with the Australian Cricket Association. Nick Hockley, CEO of Cricket Australia, is in Pakistan at the moment. He's in contact with Todd Greenberg, and I've been chatting to Greg Dyer, who's the chair of the ACA as well. So cricketers will unite in good times, we unite in sad and tough times as well.
And is there any further details you can give about his passing?
No, I don't have any other details of his passing, and we'll obviously not comment further on that today, other than what's known publicly, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment today.
Can I ask you one more stuff? There's already an outpouring of emotion from the Victorian public to encourage cricket fans to come along and celebrate Shane Warne.
Look, I think the fact that so many people have already come down and laid flowers and stubbies at at the statue probably demonstrates that Melburnians, Victorians will come down here and pay their own homage to Shane without needing to be that being suggested to them by anyone from government or cricket. He was beloved by cricket fans and Victorians for a long, long time, and I would expect that without me needing to say or do anything, people will be coming down here all day, all weekend, well into next week, and I suspect they'll have the same reaction when they see that statue that I did this morning. It's a really, really tough day, really emotional day. Thanks everyone. Cheers.
Thanks everyone for coming. It was appropriate on the way here this morning, driving past a junior cricket ground in Victoria. Saw a young leg spin bowler bowl a beautifully flighted ball that beat the bat, and I'm sure someone was looking down on that young bowler as he embarks on his career. Thank you all for coming.